a question of prosperity. So is prosperity is the question. My background as far as the school is concerned is that I joined the school over 40 years ago to study philosophy and eventually added to that economics, and feel that it's been a wonderful education and continues to be so. I've also looked quite extensively at conventional economics and what it has to offer, or what it hasn't got to offer, more precise. And I find it very disappointing, to put it nicely, and somewhat frustrating that we can't move from current ideas that are ruining people's lives all over the world and damaging this sacred earth. It's so unintelligent, but that's how it is. So one could stop there and moan about it, or one could perhaps try to find some answers. And it's the word prosperity that came to mind some time ago, and I pursued this word because somehow it may be a way in which we can move things forward. Because there are two things I think we need to do. One, we need to look at the definitions of words that we use at the moment. And secondly, we need a different language. Because the moment we carry on with the language that had been mentioned earlier, with the same language, then we get drawn into the same sort of ideas, and it doesn't really make for a fresher approach. So a redefinition, if you like, or refinement of existing concepts. And what we need is a new economics, and we need new economists with different mindsets and different way of approaching things. And I hope I might make some contribution towards that. I hope you've read the extract, but I'll move straight on from there and just ask the question at the moment what we consider prosperity to be. What is the general ideas of prosperity? We have people who measure or attempt to measure prosperity, and they use measures such as gross domestic product, personal income, inflation levels, levels of employment, average longevity of life, level of household consumption, establishment of democracy, physical health, and personal freedom. You notice these are very much, in my view, very limited. They're very limited in the physical world. Somehow prosperity seems to be calling us further than that into the deeper realms of human experience and enlightenment. That's the question. Are they indicators of real prosperity? When you look at the Latin, you have prosperitas from prosperitus, doing well, flourishing, and the condition of being successful or thriving. It has this sense of, very much the sense of flourishing, of the human being flourishing. So that takes us into a deeper realm rather than the physical realm of human life. The methodology that I've chosen is to try to explore the current situation very briefly with you. I think you're probably better versed than I am even, and its effects on human life and the sacred earth. What has created this situation, and then what are the underlying principles of true prosperity? The assumption really is that prosperity, in the sense of a wellspring of well-being and happiness, is the aim of human life. And the first observation is that a prosperous person is quite often seen as a wealthy person. So my first step, if you like, is to consider wealth. The definitions and origin, or the definitions at the moment, are, to leave those out, abundance of valuable possessions or money, state of being rich, material prosperity, plentiful supplies of a particular resource or of a desirable thing. That seems extremely limited. The archaic takes us back to Middle English and beyond that to Anglo-Saxon, which gives us a sense of happiness and well-being. And I suggest that wealth is something like that it's there for a purpose. But in truth, the source of all wealth is the sacred earth. And the establishment of the sacred earth is enshrined in law, as we've already heard, and leads to it be considered as a commodity which can be bought and sold. And it's this commoditization that is at the heart of economic injustice. For further information, join the course. And then categories of wealth. The first, one could look at it from the point of view as the inherent wealth of sacred earth, the source of health and well-being for all of us. And then there is this secondary wealth, which is really important, where we transform the wealth that is provided at using our inherent talents and skills. It can be assisted by credit, which is the trust in all of us. But it's at that point that the human development is possible on all levels. The development of skills which bring us happiness, satisfaction, and furthermore to lead us to the deeper appreciation of what it is to be human. So secondary wealth, the creation of secondary wealth, and how that's conducted, and how an economy allows that to be conducted, what constraints it might put on it, all have a very big effect on human life and how the human life sees the sacred earth. If we are driven into secondary wealth, thinking of an income and thinking of survival, then we don't really have time to think. And I think one of the biggest problems is we don't simply think. It's not that we don't care so much, but I think we don't think. We don't think of this beautiful earth. And then we have this question mark of tertiary wealth, which is credit, debt, and money created for any purpose, including speculation. It's also used as a means to perpetuate what is called economic growth. And the question about that is it real wealth? How can it be real wealth when it's assisting secondary wealth? It really doesn't have any substance as such. It's useful, but nothing else, if it's used for the right purpose. Just to finish with that, there is a belief in this wealth, then it leads to an obsession with money. Interest, which is the cost of this, can only be paid out of secondary wealth. And we get a growing creation of debt. The idea is, again, that we have overlying things is that even countries of surplus are encouraged to take on debt. It's used as a means, as I've mentioned, to perpetuate economic growth, which is seen as the only panacea to the problems we have. So that's where we are. And there's one other mix, part of the mix, which is the energy obsession. 86% of energy, as you probably know, or something like that, is produced from fossil fuels. The net return is getting less. Fuel subsidies are distorting the true cost. We have renewable energy, but that is being subsidised and is a very, very slow process. But even that needs fossil fuels in order to build the infrastructure. We have this idea of nuclear energy, which I won't say too much about, other than it seems a rather peculiar idea to leave all this waste to generations to come, generations upon generations, without having an idea of what we can do with it. Thousands of tons of very dangerous nuclear waste. The assumptions that are carried forward is that there will always be an increase in quantity, not so much a consideration of quality, but there will always be secondary wealth, and it will continue to increase. We can just have the second assumption is that we can always have access to primary wealth. And we can also create credit and debt to feed this obsession we have and this so-called economic growth. So energy is linked to debt in this way. In simple terms, economies must grow to support a money system which appears it can grow without limit, and the fossil fuel energy system cannot continue to grow without serious damage to the sacred earth. As the ownership of sacred earth is permitted without responsibility, then the injustice gets greater. And economic growth, I'm quite passionate about. We have to stop, this is where we need to change our language. Let's stop calling it economic growth and let's call it out for what it is. It's material growth. It's got nothing to do with real economics. Real economics, which is about the human being. This is material growth. So can we replace this dead-end policy with true prosperity? And if we can, how? Well, I'm trying a simple diagram, which begins with a line of prosperity. It's a very simple diagram. They don't get much simpler. And it may be seen as a sense of balance that we find in our own lives, because it is an individual thing, I suggest. So we begin with that, and we recognize that we have two possibilities if we do not induce measure into our lives, and that is excess, which leads to deprivation. There's two ways that can be seen. One is that if we get excess ourselves, then we deprive ourselves. We take too much, then we deprive ourselves. And you can see it the other way, that if you take too much, you deprive someone else. Whichever way you like. That is the law. And I'm trying to describe it simply. The law of prosperity is the extent that there is excess, there will be deprivation. We need simple concepts, and I hope this is useful. And how does it work? Well, here's the current danger situation. We have current economic and social activity. It's in red, I hope this time. Yes, good. And we have a fair amount of excess and deprivation. An extreme amount when we look around. That's where we find ourselves. They're friends. Excess and deprivation go hand in hand. It's a good way of seeing it. Now, turning this round, there is another possibility. And the possibility is the entry of emerging justice. It could be said that the most wonderful thing about the school, and why I'm so interested and passionate about economics in the school, is it based on justice. And when you have the force of justice, it's possible that the excess and deprivation can be reduced if we take on board what those tenets are of justice, and whether we can induce others perhaps to follow. And this is how it works. You can see the excess and deprivation will get less as the force of justice becomes stronger. So when one gets less, then the other must get less. You get the idea. They work in tandem. So against that, there is this battleground of material growth in developed economies. And that pushes in a different direction. And you can see there is the battleground. The appearance of real prosperity, and against that, the current ideas which are leading us nowhere. I think it was in 1492, not too far from here in Florence, there was a burning of the books of vanities, something like that. I think it's time really we need another bonfire, and that's economics textbooks. So let me know, anyone, if you get involved in that. I'd like to light the match, I really would. So this is trying to keep a simple diagram, how we can move, but it's not quite enough, because what do we need for this to move with justice? I suggest that natural law needs to be founded. And if we have new economists, the first thing they need to know is natural law. The law, as it's described here, a philosophy asserting that certain rights are inherent by virtue of human nature. endowed by nature, traditionally by God or a transcendental source, and that these can be understood universally through human reason. So it's what's inherently what we are. That is human nature. That is natural law. Those are the laws that govern what we are. I'm indebted to the International Encyclopedia of Social Sciences for that. It seems a very good description. It's different from natural laws, which are everywhere. And natural law is a body really of study really, which is to do with humans. Okay, how would it work? Guided by natural law. Prosperity guided by natural law would lead us into a band, what I call a band of prosperity, around this central line of measure, which is not too much and not too little, if you like, the virtue of temperance. And here it is, excess, deprivation, and this area of prosperity. Now you'll notice on this that there is a cycle. And we will find, I suggest, in the ordinary course of events that there are cycles. There are natural cycles, governed by all kinds of natural events, weather, and so on. We can work within those, and sometimes things will be a little bit easier and sometimes a little bit more challenging. Well, that's fine. Why should that be a problem? But we keep to that central line as our guidance, as our guide. Now, from excess to natural life, how does it work? Well, the first thing is to understand, to recognise that there's a unifying force, which has been mentioned already, through the entire universe. That all creatures are therefore interdependent. And therefore that leads us to a responsibility that everyone has the prospect of a prosperous life. Responsibility to ensure that people don't fall into poverty and are given the opportunity for prosperity. Because if they don't get prosperity, which I suggest is their birthright, then we will get poverty. Why should we have human beings in poverty? That doesn't make sense. Doesn't make any sense to me anyway. The creation of useful secondary wealth, working with respect for the sacred earth, gives the opportunity for real human development through nurture, cultivation of talents and good education. The contribution at every level of life, enthusiastic participation of the world, in the world, and freedom to engage with our fellow human beings with the sacred earth, And guided by natural law, we find that obedience to natural law leads us to, with justice, to connecting with abundance. I could say a lot more about abundance, but I don't have time. But I think we've all got a good idea of what abundance is from talking to many of you. This great abundance that's provided for us. And it's connecting with that abundance. I think John spoke about this earlier. That was the sense I got. Can lead us to a real and lasting freedom. And this is really getting to the heart of human life, I would suggest. Speaking as someone who studied philosophy and economics for a long time, it seems to encompass everything. Finally, we need to know what we need to move into this band of prosperity. First of all, to seek justice. And to adopt justice as a benchmark of human progress. Not how much is our GDP? Is our GDP going up? Are we producing more of things? But a benchmark of human progress is this policy that's adopted just? Is it benefiting everyone? To be generous to everyone. To be patient. I heard about patience just today. It's wonderful. Just the presentation earlier about Auschwitz. To be patient until it's the right time to build. And that's following nature. And work with nature and do not seek to force nature. be compassionate to all creatures, including us, other human beings, and be willing to coexist. To be strong to forgive. To call out cruelty. There is far too much cruelty in the world. Corporations are full of cruelty, not only to their customers, but to the people who work there. And to explore something else, in English called loving kindness. And take upon ourselves a certain self-discipline of not too much and too little, and find that natural measure. And above all, to seek and love wisdom that's in every culture and every civilization. And the positive actions, first of all, the recognition that human rights arise from meeting obligations and duties. If we seek change, we should be the catalyst. We become more just that way. Don't leave it to someone else. I mean, who else are you going to leave it to? Demand only policies which suit the particular time and place. And just ask ourselves of any economic activity, what is the real purpose of this? Secondary wealth should be creative and fulfilling. And if we employ anyone to seek to do that, to our employees, if we employ ourselves or work it in ourselves, make sure we're being creative and that way be fulfilling. Disconnect from the financial economy whenever possible, only go into debt when necessary. As Ian Mason's mentioned earlier, grow our own food as much as possible. Disconnect with the language of material growth and material progress. It's a dead-end situation, isn't it? As Socrates reminds us, injustice and intemperance, and in general the depravity of the soul, are the greatest of evils. A golden rule, the golden rule to help us. And here are the expressions in Christianity. We know the Christian one. The Confucian, do not do unto others what you do not want them to do to you. Hinduism, this is the sum of our duty. Do not do to others what we cause pain if done to you. And Buddhism, hurt not others in ways that you yourself would find hurtful. It encompasses it all, really. And the current Vedanta tradition has been expressed as whatever is unfavourable to us, whatever we don't feel is good, that we should not do to others. So the conclusions, it's natural for every human being to seek and grow and find fulfillment in their life and freedom. And the material world is only there for survival and perhaps a limited degree of happiness. And economic policy based upon the pursuit of material growth gives us a very limited world and doesn't provide us with satisfying lives. But the answer, as I see it, is real human growth can be really understood with an understanding of true prosperity. So there's an urgent need to focus on this. And this will bring, I'm sure, substantial happiness, well-being, and the possibility of true freedom. It's a personal challenge. And finally, to assist us with this challenge, I'd like to recommend you to an uplifting vision of a glorious future for humanity. And this comes from the Vedic tradition of many millennia ago. May all be happy, may all be without disease, may all creatures have well-being, and none be in misery of any kind. I think we take that to heart. It seems thousands of years ago there was a race that did take it to heart, and they founded the spiritual home of humanity in India. So it's now up to us to take this to heart. Thank you very much.